Szeretettel üdvözlünk mindenkit a Budapesti Zsidó és Izraeli Filmfesztivál kísérő programján, amikor Hitler ellopta a rózsaszín Nyuszit című film készítőjével, Caroline Link-kel fogok most beszélgetni angol nyelven. A programot most felvételről láthatjátok. Caroline, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And thank you so much for this wonderful film that we can show now in the Budapest Jewish and Israeli Film Festival.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.
So I'm very excited. I've never actually had a conversation with somebody who won the Oscar prize. And I've read some things about how you made the book, how you made the film, and how you prepared for it. And I watched the film, of course. And the first question to you is, how many times did you read the book? I read that you read it as a child. And I was wondering, was this a book that you kept rereading, or this was like a childhood memory that you took up as an adult?
No, yeah, it was mandatory to read the book in school when I was about 11 years old. So we all read it, and I remember that I was very grateful to the book that that it told a story about the Second World War, about escaping the Nazis, but at the same time, it wasn't a book that you had to be afraid of. I thought it is a very, very emotional and tense book, and I was wondering many years later, when a film producer, offered me to make a movie out of this novel, what was it that moved me so much when I was a girl? And I tried to, and of course, then I read it a few times again, and I tried to find out what was the specialty about this kind of storytelling and about Judith Kerr's handwriting. Why is it so moving, although almost nothing really happens? It's not a very suspenseful story. It's a very quiet little story. And still, why is it emotional? So I tried to find this out. I had to read the book a couple of times, or a few times again.
Mm-hmm. And then you met, of course, Judith Kerr, who you also worked with when making the film. How was that relationship? How was meeting her, and did it change your perspective on the book when you had the ability to actually talk to her on the narrative?
Unfortunately, I never met her. I only talked to her on the telephone. She was very old already. I think when we first started working on the screenplay, she was 93, and she didn't like to travel anymore. And so we talked a few times about movies and about this story, that book that meant a lot to her, that was very, very holy for her. And it was a great privilege that I had the permission to make a movie out of it, because she was very skeptical about every change and about everything that could go wrong with that story that was so very important to her. And she knew my movie Nowhere in Africa, which also tells the story about a Jewish family that escapes the Nazis and goes to Kenya in 1938. And so she liked the movie, fortunately. And so she was very supportive of the process.
So she trusted you in making the film?
I would say she was smart enough to realize that a book is something different from a movie, and that maybe some changes have to be made to make it a suspenseful movie. In Germany, or not suspenseful, but an intense movie. In Germany, there had been a two-part TV movie from when Hitler stole Pink Rabbit, from the late 70s, I think. And she was not very happy with that TV adaptation. So she realized, okay, if you make one-to-one this novel into a movie, maybe it's not working. So I introduced all the little changes that I made, and she was, at the end, she was supportive of that.
Oh, that's good to hear. And can you tell, what are the main differences in your opinion between the book and the film? Of course, it's a very different genre to write a book or to make a film, and one has to use different methodologies to get a message through. And I know you talk about the atmosphere being more important than the plot and the narrative. But can you like point out like which are the main differences between the movie itself and the book, and why did you think it was important to have it differently?
I think the main difference is really that the book is definitely a children's book. It's a book for children and very young growing up adults, maybe more teenagers, I think. And the movie is not so much only for children. I thought the character of Alfred Kerr, of Judith Kerr's father, was very interesting. And I read a lot about him, and I read the biography from Deborah Vitor Engländer, and that is a very, very interesting biography. And I realized how do you say, ambivalent Alfred Kerr was. He was a very feared critic in Germany in the 20s and 30s, and he was not only the nice and warm and loving father that Judith Kerr remembered. So I thought it makes the story more interesting and my movie more interesting if when the character of the father is a little bit more complex. And so I made some changes. I had him in the movie. He writes these letters to home. He has opinions about the politics, about the Nazis, of course, and also he is very, in a way, not arrogant, but a little bit arrogant or vain or easy to be insulted by generous gifts from other Jewish families, for example, in my movie. That is not like that in the book from Judith Kerr. She didn't want any criticism or any subtext that could criticize her father, and I never tried to do that. I thought it makes him just a three-dimensional grown-up character.
Actually, I very much like the complexity of that character, because you show the arrogance and you show the stubbornness of the person who is like refusing the help from that guy who's offering the clothing for the kids, and who would actually be more okay the kids not having good clothes or than just receiving a gift from somebody who thinks he's not talented. Yes. And I felt that it's like very nice because it's not like all good and bad. It like shows like the complexity of the character. So
he was somebody. He was a name in Germany, and people wanted something from him in Germany. Everybody wanted his friendship, his support, his appreciation. And all of a sudden, in exile, he had lost so many opportunities and possibilities to live a life as a privileged person, of course, and that was difficult for him. And it was also in real life very difficult for Judith Kerr's mother, but she didn't mention any of that in the children's book, and I tried to bring at least a little bit into it, but into the movie. But Judith Kerr was hesitant about those decisions. She was not sure if, and she thought I make a children's film. When I said, it's not only a children's film, I think I want to make the movie that I would love to see as a grown-up person too. And then she accepted that.
So the book obviously had an influence on you and your identity and how you view things. Did you have the same kind of goal with the film, that it will have some kind of influence? Or to put the question differently, other than making an important book on screen, what are the other motivations for you to make such a film?
I think you always see every story that you read in the context of the time, in the connection of the time you live in. And so I read the book when I was 11, and that was in the 70s, and the Second World War was not so far away. I had grandparents who were in the Second World War. I had parents who were children in the Second World War. So the Second World War was still, even though I didn't know a lot about it as a child, I still felt the aftermath of the war in our society, I think. And so when I read the book, I read a book about the escape of a Jewish family because of the German politic and because of Hitler, of course. But when I made the movie, and this is now in the 2020s, I see I'm lacking the word. I see the connection to our times, you know, and so we were thinking when we developed the screenplay, we were thinking a lot about the situation of the refugees, about people who are escaping their countries, their homelands, without really having done anything wrong, without being, you know, really wanting to do that. So I think the children and young people and the people who see the movie in Germany today, they put the connection more, not so much anymore of maybe to the Second World War, but to the present situation of our times, and about the situation, they put it into connection with refugees today.
And there is this ambivalence feeling, like, for instance, in Hungary, when we had the refugee crisis, many people in the Jewish community felt uneasy about this. And one would have thought, or a lot of people thought, that, you know, the Jewish communities will be very open to the idea because they have this historical experience of being migrants. And while watching the film, I had the same kind of feeling, and it reminded me of the refugee crisis and the debates we had within the Jewish community and also in the entire society about, you know, welcoming people and accepting. So you say that this was kind of an underlying message also, or maybe not even so underlying message, to shed a light on this historical topic, which is very relevant today.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that is what movies and cinema can. That is what movies do with you, that you feel empathy for the characters you see on the screen. And I think the little girl, Anna, is not a girl that comes from a crisis region of the world where children would say, okay, always the problems of the Africans or in the Middle East, or, you know, these are areas, crisis, where you can sometimes say that has always been difficult there, and you know, this is fortunately not our life, and all that. But with this girl and her brother, I think children can understand very easily how it must have felt at that time to be forced to leave your home from one day to the other. And Anna and Max, they are just kids from the neighborhood, you know, they are just kids that could live today right next to you. And all of a sudden, you know, they have to give up everything that means a lot to them: people, things, home, language, you know. And so I think it's very easy for children to identify with Anna and Max, and that is what makes the story so accessible for young people, at least in Germany.
The tension, although it's Second World War and we know what's going to happen historically, this tension is very subtle in the film, and I guess also in the book, that you don't really feel they are in immediate danger, although you are always fearing that something could happen, and it's very interesting because I could not tell if this is because I know the historical period. So before Hitler came to power, there shouldn't be any problems leaving the country, but you still have those doubts. So I guess this was also on purpose. But can you address that? Like, was there any difference between the tension in the book and the tension in the film? And if there is a difference between the storytelling narrative, what's the reasoning behind putting the tension on such a subtle level?
Yeah, I think that was one strength of the novel as well from Judith Kerr. And I really tried to go along with that. And I tried to find out how she did it, because I think that makes this book already so special, that she doesn't stress any super dangerous or action moments, you know, or some Nazis banging on the door, or immediate danger, as you say. And I think I always try to capture that into the screenplay of the movie as well. And even though sometimes the producers or the distributor said, don't you think we need a little bit more suspense? It's really a lot going, one scene after the other and one country after the other, and nothing really happens. Don't we need more suspense? And I always thought, no, if Judith Kerr managed to write that legendary book about that, so I want to use what is in that unique story and to make a movie out of those ingredients as well, and don't pep it up, you know, or make it more suspenseful with outside suspense, because it's all inside. It's all It's all about slowly accepting the situation you're in, slowly realizing how serious the situation is. And that I thought was very, very moving, that Anna is so so brave, you know. I invented the calendar that she draw.
Oh, that she crosses the days until she gets back.
Because I thought that is maybe one red thread that goes through the story and can pull the story a little bit and holds the story a little bit together, that at the beginning the girl thinks, okay, this is only going to be for a few weeks or maybe months. And then she crosses the days until they go back home, until she finally realizes this is not about weeks or months or not even about years. They are never going to go back home. And I thought when she throws away the calendar at the end, that means that she accepts the state or the situation that the family is in, and that she has to look into the future to be able to cope with that. If she always looks back, she will always be unhappy. And I thought that is something that's in the book from Judith Kerr, very movingly, that how she always says, through the help of her father mainly, how the children always say yes to the new situation. And there are beautiful text passages or moments in Judith Kerr's book that I used, of course, when the little girl says, all famous people have to have a difficult childhood, otherwise they cannot become famous, and all this. These are some beautiful quotations, I think, so moving, that she thinks, okay, maybe it is just very difficult now because one day I will be a painter or a writer, or I have to have a difficult childhood. That's just the way it is. And how she and the father always supports this. Look into the future. Look what's before you. Don't always look back. Look into the future and all the possibilities you have.
It's very interesting because on the one hand, it's you know, a family that you don't want to envy because they have to like flee. You know, they don't have money at some point. They used to be famous and wealthy, and they go like down and down. They are chased and they have to find solutions. They have to survive, and nobody wants to be like a survivor. On the other hand, it shows like an idealistic kind of family where they really like each other. There is really strong attachment to each other. And also the girl, as she like goes through the story, as she accepts more and more, at the very end, she's like, oh, we are going into the next place. Fine, I will learn English. That will be no problem. So
yeah, and still, I think underneath all that is a great sadness. And I think that is what Judith Kerr told me too, that underneath everything there was always this sadness. But the parents, they helped the children to stay strong. They never showed the existential worries they had, I think, not like today where parents share a lot with their children, and of course I shared a lot with my daughter too, and we talked much more like parents in those days did. But still, I sometimes thought, wow, the kids grew up quite protected from the worries of the parents, and the father was always trying not to lose the face in front of his children and always point out the positive. And life is complicated. Life is complex, I think. And Judith Kerr told me on the phone, and I thought I would have never dared to write that or to say that. She can only say that because she went through that story, and she is Jewish. She still always said, you know what, this was maybe the most beautiful time in my life. And even though everything was so sad, and that she lost her friends, her family, and her home, she had that in very, very intense and warm memory, that the family belonged together, that they stood together, and that she was so close with her parents in those years, that they all lived in Paris in that little place, but they all almost slept in one bed. They were really, really giving each other strength. And she said that was a very, very beautiful time for our family as well, and not knowing the existential worries the parents had, of course.
How interesting she said that. I think this beautifully comes through the film, because it's really showing the perspective mostly of the youngest kid.
It shows a lot about family, yeah. It shows a lot about family. It's as long as we stay together, everything is going to be okay. That's her life motto in a way.
It's interesting that you say that now we are sharing more with our kids than it used to be. And it reminds me, like, this was written as a children's book, and this film is maybe not a children's film, but like for younger ones, it's you can show it to a variety of age groups. But today or these days, we are always faced the question when we should talk about things like the Holocaust or these kind of historical traumas. What's your personal opinion about that? And I know Germany also went through an evolution. In Hungary, we have this still a problem when and what to talk about. And, you know, when a nation has to face its past, it's always controversial. But when it comes to educating children, you have to find the right balance. And in your opinion, what is the right balance? When can you first have children be faced with very serious traumas? And when is it maybe too late?
Oh, that's difficult to say. I think you always have to look at the child that's in front of you. They are very sensitive children, and they are children who can cope better with information like that. I think we start in Germany in school not until the children are about 14 or 15 to teach them about the history of our country in that perspective. But there are, of course, earlier already many possibilities where you can begin to talk about that we have that history. You don't have to go into all the horrible details, because that's just too much to understand for a child, I think. And especially when I was young, you know, of course I asked my grandparents, what did you do in that time? Because they were young in that time. They were, I mean, young grown-ups in that time. So the question of guilt, of responsibility, why didn't you go into resistance? You know, as a child, you want to know, what did you do against it? Why didn't you stop Hitler? Why were we so supportive of him? And I think it should never be a taboo to talk about those things. You should always invite your children to ask questions and to be open. And there is no when they bring up Hitler or National Socialism. I think there should always be an open door to conversations like that. So if there is any kind of question, don't relativize it. Is that a word in English?
Yes.
Don't play it down. Don't say, well, you know, it wasn't so difficult, so tough, we didn't know, and all this. They want to know the truth, the children, and it was a horrible Black history of our country. And whenever my daughter asked me anything about it, I would always take the time to answer her questions.
We are always, when we do a Jewish film festival, it's very subjective. What is Jewish? And of course, there are always a number of films that are about the Holocaust, which makes it Jewish, of course. But we always have, also within the Jewish community and also in the larger society, this question of Holocaust fatigue, that people within the Jewish community are fed up that we are always talking about the Holocaust, and we always get questions, okay, assure me that there won't be so many films about the Holocaust on the Jewish Film Festival, or please, I don't want to be identified by the Holocaust, I want to have a positive identity. And in the larger society, not only in anti-Semitic circles, but also in anti-Semitic circles, it comes up that we always talk about the Holocaust. But even in not anti-Semitic circles, people say maybe it's like too much that we do, and it's of course very subjective. Have you faced this Holocaust fatigue thing when making the film, or when it was received? Or what do you think about talking too much about the Holocaust, making too many films about the Holocaust, or it's something that it's never in?
I agree personally as a filmmaker that I don't want to make another movie with the same cliches and the same images that we have all seen so many times. There have just simply been too many bad movies about the Holocaust, about the National Socialistic times in Germany. You know, every second TV movie was for a certain time, in a certain time about that. And if you really want to talk about it again, and I think it's always necessary, it's always important to keep it alive, and because it is a part of our history, but then you have to make intelligent movies about it. And that was what I liked about the book from Judith Kerr so much, that it did not use the same images, that it did not use the same, the same very close coming up to your mind images of the 30s in Germany or the 40s, you know, because it uses that very unsuspenseful but still intense emotional handwriting, and that's what I liked about the book, and that's why I liked that story. Also, when I made Nowhere in Africa, this is told completely outside of Germany, and it's still mirrors what's happening in Germany in Kenya, while the people are in Kenya in exile. So exile stories move me and interest me, because the world was not globalized as our world is today, and people were forced to live or build up a new existence in countries where you never would have thought you would end up one day, in China or in South America or in Kenya, in Africa, you know. So those stories interest me personally a lot. Where did people had to go to just get out of Germany? And I think you always have to try to find a new view onto that time, to not tell it in cliche images. And I remember when I traveled to Israel one time, and I was with Nowhere in Africa in Tel Aviv, that the older people appreciated the movie for the subject matter, and the younger people also said, oh, we don't want to talk about the Holocaust anymore. You know, what interests us more is tell us about Berlin, what's going on in Berlin, because they all were crazy about going to Berlin. They liked the city and the vibes of the city, you know. So I was happy to learn that this is not only a German fatigue, but it's also in Israel, where the young people think Berlin or some parts of Germany are pretty cool, you know.
Very nice. And last but not least, can you tell us what's the next story or project you are working on?
I'm working on a TV series at the moment about two children's psychologists. You know, they have a doctor's office, you know, in Berlin, and they treat kids who have different how do you say in English, different, well, problems. They have different, problems, psychological problems. And what they do with those children, that's what we tell in the series. But cinema is going to be after that. Cinema, I want to go back to cinema. This is what.
Well, good luck with that. And knowing where works, I'm sure it will be excellent, and can't wait to see the next coming up. Caroline Link, thank you so much for being with us. It was an honor to talk to you. And I hope to see you sometime in the future. Maybe another film will come to our festival. Okay. And if you visit Hungary, please let us know. Hungary would love to have you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks. And enjoy the movie, whoever wants to see it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.